Okay, so here we have deck 1. Now this is the attack dog deck, and it's got a very specific design to it, and that is that the whole thing is focused around these two cards here, these heroes, and getting equipment all over them and then pounding face. Frodo is your blocker, and Gimli is your attacker. As we talked about, Beravor is in here for card draw. Now, the idea is that this deck is going to have the highest threat because of Frodo's ability. So all the monsters are going to be attacking Frodo because of the high threat that he generates. You could swap a really good card. A later card is Boromir. Boromir is a great way to get your threat higher than your partner's. You can just tap it and bam, you've got high threat to draw cards to you. It's a really handy way of controlling the board presence. But we're using Frodo for a similar effect. So the idea is that the monsters are mainly going to be coming to this side of the table, and we're going to be tapping Beravor on that same side of the table because then we want to use combined attacks with Brand to untap Beravor to get 4-card draw a turn optimally. So I mean, we talked about that in the thing. So that's what this deck is for. So let's have a quick look at the deck itself and see what we've got. Basically, we have Galadriel's Greeting and we have Dwarven Tomb. And that is basically our threat management for this deck, right? And it also is able to threat manage various other players because of the Greeting being able to cast outside. Now, the reduce everyone's threat by 2 I think is a very weak effect, but reducing by 6 is extremely strong. And we've basically, because of the tombs, we've basically got 6 Galadriel's Greetings. And you'll see later on we actually have a Test of Will, I think it's called. No, I can't remember what it's called. It's the one that's Will of the West. And we've got a Will of the West in one of the other decks, which allows us to reshuffle all the... And the idea is that this is the deck that's the target of. And the idea is to reshuffle the Tombs and the Greetings back into his hand so he can draw more threat management for the entire team. So that's very, very important. Now, you'll notice that we actually have 3 different spheres, okay? So this entire deck, everything's very low cost. We don't want to have to spend time and card slots overloading with resource engines and, mana fixing with songs and stuff like that. So everything's quite low cost. In fact, there's a few high cost cards, and we'll get to them eventually, but most of them are 3 or lower. Now, let's just go through some of the unusual choices. And you might be thinking, well, what is an attack deck doing with Rithermark's Finest? Which I think is actually quite underutilized card. And basically, Rithermark's Finest is what I consider to be a nice chump blocker with an ability, okay? Now, the other decks have Horn of Gondor, which this can power, but what we want here is we want to cast this guy, and it can chump block and kill, okay? It's never going to be tapped. The point is, you don't tap this card. This card stays untapped, because to use its effect, you have to tap it. Okay, so you don't quest with this guy, unless you have to, I guess, if you really need that 1 point. But luckily you won't, if you're lucky. So we have a chump blocker that we can actually tap at will to add progress tokens and power Horn of Gondor. We can use it as a chump blocker, which is really, really good, and it also combos with this other card, which looks a little strange at first, but is actually quite funky, and that is Strength of Will. Now, Strength of Will, I think, is a very underutilized card. I use it quite a lot because I often run Eleanor, and as I said, with Eleanor, you don't tap Eleanor. Her whole point of Eleanor is to remain untapped. Okay? So the chances are, with Eleanor and with Rivermark's Finest, you're often going to be in the situation where Strength of Will is going to be a live card. And it's basically 2 free progress tokens on a travel. And if you combine that with the power of the Northern Tracker, you can just burn through actual, locations during the travel phase. You just burn through the travel phase. So you travel, drop this, it's gone, and then bang. Okay. Now it does have some problems. So it only happens after you travel. Okay. But it's extremely good, and it speeds up questing because you can actually just start placing tokens directly on the main quest. So that's what these two cards are doing here. They look a little out of place in this deck, and I can see why people would think that, but they actually combo quite well with the entire game strategy as a whole. Okay, so what else have we got in here? We have a very expensive card, Fortune of Fate. Now, obviously this is a late game card, and you probably will not need this, but it's in the deck in case you have to use it. Okay, then we have the Old Faithful, which is a Test of Will. If you're not running Test of Wills, then there's something wrong with your brain. And Hasty Stroke. Now, a lot of people like to load up on Hasty Stroke. I think Hasty Stroke is a great card, but I also think it's a bit negated by good old Burning Brand over here. Okay, so Burning Brand basically makes these cards a lot less needed. So if you're going to have 3 Burning Brand like we have, you don't need to stock up with 6 or whatever. There's 4 of these in the deck because we have 2 in the other Spirit deck. Right, but we all know what that card is. Doesn't need much explaining. We have Faint. Don't need much explaining for Faint. And we have Quick Strike, I think it's called. Yeah, Quick Strike. Now, Quick Strike, doesn't need much explaining. It's another simple, low-cost card, easy to cast, and can, really put some damage out. Now, okay, stop. Okay, so what else have we got here? We have good old Infighting. Now, Infighting, I'm going to use this way of typing because it's a little bit easier on my fingers. Okay, so now we have Infighting. Now, Infighting is also another card that is extremely undervalued, in my opinion. It's a situational card, but you remember we're designing these decks to beat entire cycles, so the decks have to be flexible. Now, if you've got Hill Trolls, we do have Forest Snares, so you can Forest Snare really large creatures like, say, a Hill Troll and load them up with damage, and then you've basically got a gun ready at any time that you need it. Something comes in like a Goblin Sniper turns up. Oh no, that's really bad in a lot of cases if you're not running Done Here. But no, you've got Infighting, you can just kill it that way. So there's a lot of uses for Infighting, and I think it's a bit of an undervalued card. So I think it works really, really well in this deck though. Okay, so next we have our 2 songs. These are our 2 songs. Now, actually, I'll do the songs last because the songs are a little bit complicated. So now we have Burning Brand, and the obvious target of Burning Brand is Frodo. We want Burning Brand on Frodo. We want Fast Hitch on Frodo. And that means we need Song of Wisdom on Frodo. So there's quite a lot of, target-orientated attachments going on here. Now, Burning Brand, obviously, it stops any kind of shadow card for shenanigans, right? And Fast Hitch is basically a more conditional version of Unexpected Courage. It only goes on hobbits, but it's like having extra Unexpected Courages without having to buy the extra sets. So it's a very, very good card. Strongly recommend it. And the idea here is to have Frodo in a situation where he's able to tap, 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 and just block multiple people. Now, you might be thinking, well, he's only got 2 health, he's only got 2 defense, how can he block everything if his limit is only limited once per phase? Obviously, that once per phase is very powerful. And again, it's like Enelor. You just don't want to use it every single time it's possible. You use it when you think, okay, he needs to use this. You know, if he's getting attacked multiple times. And we've got the Dwarven Axes. Now we only have 2 Dwarven Axes because they are restricted, and there's quite a lot of restricted attachments, as you'll see as we get to the other decks. And of course we have card draw, card draw, card draw. It's all about card draw. More cards, more cards. Now, Northern Tracker. Now, Northern Tracker is an expensive card. It costs 4, and we only have 1 spirit icon all the way over here. But that is why we have the Song of Travel. The Song of Travel is designed to go on either of these cards. It doesn't really matter in this particular case. I usually put it on Beravor to spread it out, because Gimli will get his own massive set of attachments. Now, what we want to be doing here is just putting out as many things as possible. So we've got some nice cheap blockers. We've got a little bit larger, you know, a little bit more expensive, but still relatively cheap. And we finally have the Winged Guardians. Now, the Winged Guardians are very, very important to this deck. They combo with later on there's an Eagle deck in this thing, and it is running Support of the Eagles. And Support of an Eagles, this guy is the major, like the priority target for Support of the Eagles, with this these Winged Guardians. And there's actually 4 Winged Guardians in this set, or there might be 5, I can't remember. But there's a lot of Winged Guardians because it is such an integral part of this deck. 1, it has Sentinel, so it can block anywhere on the board. I mean, that's just amazing. 2, it can combo with Support of the Eagles to give Frodo +4 defense. So that already makes him +6 defense. We've got some defense marks in here as well. You get them on Frodo as well. So you can get him quite easily, and what I mean by quite easily, as in every single game you play, you can get him to like 8, you know, 6 or 7, say 7. You can get him to like 7 defense every single time with the Burning Brand. Okay? It just makes him unstoppable. He's got so much defense, he can tap around, he can untap to defend multiple times. He's got the panic event, the panic effect if you need to eat some threat, if it, you know, spills over, and he destroys the encounter, the shadow cards as they get cast. So that is basically how this particular deck is running. Okay, so yeah, let's do the next one.